These Barricade Fender Flares are going to be for those of you that have a 1997 to 2006 TJ that are looking to completely change up the look of your Jeep. These are going to be a fairly involved installation. In fact, I'm going to go all the way up to a 3 out of 3 install on these because you do have to do a good bit of cutting on the factory front fenders, but we'll talk a little bit more about that installation in just a second. So there are really two schools of thought when it comes to a fender flare, specifically a flat fender flare for your Jeep. Some people think that because this is metal, it's going to provide some additional protection to your Jeep, and that makes a lot of sense. The other school of thought is that you actually want your fender flares to be a plastic material or a soft material that's going to bend and flex. The idea being that if you make contact with something off-road or even on-road, you want the fender flare that's pretty easy and inexpensive to repair to go ahead and flex and break if it's going to break. Whereas if you have something metal, it can actually transfer an impact into the rest of the body of the Jeep, causing a much more expensive repair. So it really comes down to your thought process and what sort of fender flare you like on your Jeep. If you are considering a metal fender flare, I really do like these ones from Barricade. There are some others out there that are going to be a little bit more expensive, and they're really not going to have a lot more features over what these have. I think these give your Jeep a really nice look. One thing to note is that these are not going to provide a ton of additional up travel to your Jeep. Now, if you have a set of factory fender flares, as you're articulating and you're flexing off-road, the tire may come in contact with a fender flare, but that's not really limiting your articulation. These, being a flat flare, are going to get rid of that contact, but again, not really adding a ton of additional articulation. In fact, up front, Jeep has notched out the metal to give you the maximum amount of travel of that front axle, and by adding this where it has a solid tube that runs all the way across the front of this front fender, you may actually lose just a little bit of up travel. Again, if you are looking at a set of fender flares though, I do like these ones. I think they're well put together, they're strong, I like the coating on them, and they are going to be a pretty good price. These flares are made of steel. Up front here, you're going to have 2-inch round tube that is 0.12 inch wall thickness. The flat stock here is 3/16 inch steel, so you are going to get a good bit of strength from these flares. They're going to be covered in that textured black powder coating that's going to match a lot of the factory plastic accents on your Jeep, as well as a lot of other aftermarket accessories that you may have bolted on your Jeep, so they are going to match and they're going to fit in very well. Like I said before, the installation of these is going to be a little bit of a difficult one because of all the cutting that's required, but that's not specific to this set of metal fender flares. That's pretty much universal across all metal fender flares. And you can always take your Jeep to a shop if you would rather have them install these. One other thing that some other manufacturers do include on their front metal flares that these ones are not going to is a marker light or a solution to your lack of marker light once you get rid of that factory fender flare. Now there is a small hole drilled in this gusset in the front flare here. You can go ahead and fill that with an LED marker light. You can get creative. There are certainly a lot of solutions to this problem. However, do know that that's something you're going to need in order to stay legal and stay safe, and that's not something that's included in the box when you purchase these flares. So I've mentioned a couple times this is a bit of an involved install. We're going to have somebody from the installation team show you exactly how to get these bolted onto your TJ.
First step, we're going to remove the stock fender flares using an 8mm ratchet wrench. Unplug the corner marker and remove the fender flare from the vehicle. Next, remove the 3 13mm bolts that connect the fender to the grille. Next, remove the 4 rear fender well bolts. Next, create a template or use a Sharpie and measure out your fender. There's a small metal piece protruding upward right next to the OE headlight. That will be your starting point. From that point towards the outer edge, the OE fender will be 5 3/8 inches long. Mark it with a marker. Now, 12 inches down from your previous mark, come 4 inches out and make another mark. Now from the 4-inch mark, go 8 inches further down and come 2 3/16 out and make another mark. Okay, and lastly, from the 2 3/16 mark, go 11 inches further down and come 3/8 of an inch out and make your final mark. After you've marked your fender out, using a die grinder, cut the fender. Remove the 4 rear fender bolts and remove the rest of the fender. Once you're done cutting all the old fender off, you can begin installing your new fender flare. Use the supplied hardware, 4 13mm bolts on the rear side of the fender. Install the fender using the previously removed 13mm bolts up front. Next, using a 5/16 drill bit, drill out the 5 holes on the top of the fender and use the supplied hardware. Next, using a 3/8 drill bit, drill up from underneath of the fender of the factory hood latch location hole. Next, install the factory hood latch. After you're done installing the rest of your hardware, your installation of the front fender is complete, and you can do the exact same thing on the opposite side of the vehicle. Using an 8mm wrench, remove the 8 bolts that secure the factory fender flare to the vehicle. After removing the factory fender flare, you might have to grind some of the old nutserts out of the way so the new provided hardware will fit. Next, line up your new fender flare and install it using the provided hardware. After you're finished tightening your hardware for the fender flare, repeat the same steps for the opposite side of the vehicle, and your installation is complete.
These flares are available in individual sets. You can get either just the fronts or just the rears, but what we're talking about here today is the set of all 4, and these are gonna run you right around $500. I do think that's gonna be a pretty good deal for what you're getting, especially when you compare them to some of the other metal flares that are out there on the market. Some of those other flares will include a couple of other features, mainly the marker light in the front corner. If that's something that's really important to you, maybe take a look at one of those other brands. But if you are looking for a way to save a little bit of money and still get a very high quality option, I would definitely recommend these. So if you're looking for a quality and inexpensive set of metal fender flares for your TJ, I definitely recommend taking a look at this option from Barricade, and you can find it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.